Hey otakus, it's your tour guide here, and this is a very special video. We're going to cover the career retrospective of Jim Lee and do it through my comic books, which has grown to 200 books. I just recently added the 200th Jim Lee book to my collection, and I thought it would be fun to just go over the different eras in Jim Lee's career, from his early period to the X-Men, to Wildstorm, to his blue period, and then finally his legacy at DC. And so just sit back and enjoy as we cover the books in my collection. So let's start at the beginning. Jim Lee in 1986 published his first work with the publisher Socal for a Christmas special, with Samurai Santa on the cover. That's a very key book, but unfortunately that's one I don't have in my collection yet, but it is one I do hope to add. But we're starting here with Official Handbook of the Marvel Universe, Volume 2, Number 17. This is the deluxe edition, Book of the Dead. And Jim Lee has a very humble beginning on this book. It's one page, one panel on a deceased character named Eel. So that's how we get to start at Marvel, and we're going to go over more of how Jim Lee got his start at Marvel in later on in this video. But just know this is his sort of first official work at Marvel, very significant, and again, just one page and one panel. But there are so many great artists in this book, not just Jim Lee, but you have like the likes of John Byrne. You have Keith Pollard, who did a cover here. This was inked by Joe Rubinstein, whom I recently met at Emerald City Comic Con. A lot of great artists in this book. So this sort of encyclopedia of the Marvel Universe is a fun thing to collect. All right, next up we have Alpha Flight number 53. This is really significant. This is Jim Lee's first complete, from cover to full interior book. And what makes this really special is the fact that on his first cover he has Wolverine. I've mentioned on many occasions how important Wolverine is to Jim Lee's career at Marvel, and we get the first inkling of that here on his first cover. Again, Wolverine is a character associated with Jim Lee's success. And of course, in the next era that we cover, X-Men, we'll see that really kind of come to the fore, his work on X-Men. So just a preview of things to come here on this beautiful yellow cover, Wolverine popping out. Now, one thing you'll notice about his early style in this early period, we don't see that Jim Lee dynamic art yet. The one that has the eye-popping action, the high-intensity energy, and the really detailed anatomy. So that style, again, early on in his career, as any artist really who starts out, is just learning and figuring out and experimenting. And I feel like that's what you see here in this early period with Jim. A lot of, great work, but kind of rough around the edges. And more and more as we progress, you see that style begin to develop and really come into play later on during his career at Marvel. So again, this is a tough book to get in high grade. Yellow cover, love it. Go out and get a copy if you can. This is a really special book. All right, moving on, we have Solo Avengers, Hawkeye and Mockingbird, number 1. This is also a key book because it has Jim Lee. One of the stories is penciled by Jim Lee here. And just an early work, came out at around the same time as Alpha Flight 53. Next, we have Alpha Flight 58. And this run on Alpha Flight is significant because the editor was Carl Potts. And Carl Potts is someone who had a very, big influence on Jim's career. He was integral to giving Jim work and, starting out, hiring Jim and giving him work. This run is a great example of and features a lot of the great artwork that led to Jim getting more and more work. And I think what you'll see early on in the career, Jim is very focused on, drawing and meeting deadlines, and Marvel notices that. And Jim begins to earn a reputation and recognition for not only the quality of his work, but also just his professionalism and the fact that he gets stuff. He's a workhorse. I think Jim earns that reputation of being dependable and, a workhorse. So that does not go unnoticed here by editor Carl Potts. And this next cover is Alpha Flight number 59, and we start to see more of an inkling there. This is sort of an eye-popping cover with a dragon there. Kind of more what we're used to from Jim Lee's art, and we start to see that develop here in the progression with this Alpha Flight run. And here's Alpha Flight 60, another sort of dynamic cover where you see some action. And then we come to Marvel Age number 67 with two of Jim's probably most well-known characters at Marvel, the Punisher and Wolverine. And this is significant because, again, it's a Wolverine cover, it's a Punisher cover, but also this kind of previews Punisher War Journal and Jim's work on that book. And, Marvel Age, it's just a great book to collect, but this one's special because of the Jim Lee cover on Marvel Age. We don't see too many of those. So, special book. Now, we're getting to the period where Jim gets the assignment to do something, a run with Carl Potts. Now, Carl Potts, as you know, Punisher is a very popular title. And Carl Potts enlists Jim Lee to join him on Punisher War Journal. And so that is what is featured here in this book here, Comics Interview number 63. This is an interview from 1987, and it is Jim Lee's first published interview. So it's an interview about Punisher War Journal featuring Carl Potts and Jim Lee, and then Jim Lee's first interview. But what makes this issue very interesting, other than the fact that it's previewing Punisher War Journal number 1 and the run, again, they talk about, sort of, Carl Potts was, he has experience as a military veteran, and that was kind of on showcase in terms of the writing, so you knew the writing was going to be very good on this initial run. Carl Potts also does the cover on here, and Jim Lee inks the cover. And as you can see, it's not the best cover. But anyway, they go into detail on what this run is about. And Jim Lee ends up, commenting that this run is essentially the life and times, chronicling the life and times of the Punisher. Simple as that. I mean, what else would you expect from something called the Punisher War Journal, right? So again, this run is very key because what we see through the progression of this book is that dynamic style that I mentioned earlier. You really see that start to come to the forefront here on this run. So anyway, Jim Lee begins work on this, and again, we're going to go detail the sort of the contents of this interview. So Jim Lee outlines how he got his start at Marvel, and it's a very interesting story. Basically, as you know, Jim Lee was kind of struggling after he graduated Princeton. He had studied pre-med, and he took his MCATs, and he was all ready to apply to med school and go. But he pleaded to with his parents that he have an opportunity to pursue something was his passion. He didn't really feel like he wanted to be a doctor. And I guess his parents, for whatever reasons, they sort of gave him the opportunity. And so they said, hey, if you don't get a job in comic books within a year, then you're going to go to med school. And that's what Jim Lee, they kind of agreed to that. So Jim Lee goes to New York City. He goes to a Comic-Con there where he knows the Marvel publishers will be there. Some of the editors will be there. And he approaches the Marvel booth with Carl Potts, Archie Goodwin, and Terry Austin there. And they basically reject him. They say, hey, sorry, kid, we're only doing autographs. We're not looking at work. And they kind of shut him down. So he walks away and very dejected. Now, what's important here is in the story that Jim Lee does not leave the con. And I guess we're all, Jim Lee basically didn't leave the con. He didn't become a doctor. What he did was he stuck around and he gave it another shot. He returned to the booth and they weren't there. So again, he's kind of like, oh man, I missed them again. But then Archie Goodwin comes back to the booth and he's waiting, and Jim overhears him. I'm supposed to wait and look at this guy's artwork, but he's not here yet. And then Jim approaches him and says, Mr. Goodwin, I'd like you to look at my work again. Or could you please take another look? And Archie agrees, and the rest is history. Basically, Archie looks through and likes what he sees, and he says, hey, how long are you going to be here in the New York area? And soon after, Jim gets hired by Marvel, and the rest is history. So, again, great story. I think there's been many iterations of Jim being told by his parents to go to medical school. Now, I am a Korean American. I can attest how intense the parental pressure to be something, do something academically or do something professionally. I can attest to that. And I think, Naman Young and I have both mentioned that pressure is real and it's something hard to escape. But, Jim Lee had really great parents who kind of supported him to follow his passion, even though that pressure was there. And so I think we're all very fortunate that those things turned out the way they did. Anyway, so Jim again starts this run on Punisher, original as the inker, not the penciler, and eventually that changes. By issue 4, Jim takes over the pencils and the artwork, and a very interesting thing happens here on issue 4. He, for the first time, works with Scott Williams, and of course, how their relationship develops. But in this early period, Jim works with over almost a dozen different inkers, collaborates with different artists, let's say. These artists include the likes of Joe Rubenstein, Al Williamson, Al Milgrom, Wills Portacio, the likes of Dan Green on this book here, Uncanny X-Men, number 248, Jim Lee's first work on the X-Men. Also Klaus Janson, Bill Sienkiewicz, just a bunch of great artists. And I think that really helps him to kind of, in that learning process, to learn from, great talented colleagues was definitely very helpful. So anyway, Jim is known for his, work ethic, the quality of his work, and he finally gets a shot at X-Men. They put him on, and this is another cover he does with Dan Green. Again, he does the interiors, a great issue. And again, it kind of showcases all the work that, hard work that he put in at Marvel. And this is a great showcase of what's to come. And this cover here is really the start of where we see that dynamic style come into play. Beautiful Wolverine cover with his claws through Punisher, the chest symbol logo there. And this is a cover he does, again, with Scott Williams. And I think you start to see where that sweet spot is developing. Jim realizes, this is a book that was pretty much, very popular because it pitted two of Marvel's up-and-coming characters in the 80s, the Punisher and Wolverine, two guys from the Bronze Age who were just, really developing their wings during the 80s and kind of carried the 80s for Marvel, and Jim was very integral in doing that. So another example here of where Wolverine and Punisher, these two characters really come together to propel Jim. This is a great cover. Back in the day, it was definitely a cover buy. People were buying this because of the artwork and the story. And this is sort of really kind of hits a high point for the title with a 2-issue run here, Wolverine versus Punisher. So we have, again, issue 6, Scott Williams inks. That dynamic style comes at the fore. Really great artwork throughout the book. This is definitely a must-have. I think this is a book that's trending. And then we get more and more dynamic styles on Conan number 219. Scott Williams again works with Jim on this book, and Jim does the cover here. So great issue. Love this cover with the black horse, Conan riding through. And then again, the second part of the Punisher War Journal, Wolverine versus Punisher. This is number 7, another eye-popping dynamic cover. Now I do want to show here Punisher War Journal and see, you can kind of contrast between 6, 7, and then this issue. Here Jim Lee inks himself, and as you can see, he loses a little bit of that dynamic energy that we saw in the previous Scott Williams. And I do want to note that because I think, Jim Lee is probably being critical of what goes out and seeing, what people like and don't like. And he realizes, hey, working with Scott is very important. And then we get the second print of Uncanny X-Men 248. Comes out, several months after the initial first print of the book. So a very popular book. Marvel only second prints things that are selling well. So we know that Jim Lee's selling good books, basically. And then we continue on the Punisher War Journal with number 9. Again, the artwork, the covers here tell a great story of Jim's progression with his artwork. We get another great cover here on Conan 220. Again, continuing to gain that recognition and that reputation for quality and putting out work on time. So he's in favor with the Marvel editors, and again, he gets another here cover with on X-Men. He works with Wilson Cavich to do this really underrated cover here. Great piece. Again, we're collaborating with Wilson Cavich. Kind of get a different style here, and it goes to show how important a penciler is to your work. And then we end this early period with the Punisher War Journal number 11 in 1989. And the legend begins to grow, and really this is sort of the end of the early period. We're going to go on to his next period, the X-Men, where he really that style starts to develop and leads to one of the greatest achievements in comic books. All right.